If you've been paying attention, you know the Ukrainian counteroffensive has begun, and there's definitely some lessons to be learned from it, especially if you're trying to apply this to your own strategy if we are ever to face some sort of invasion or occupation type scenario like what they're dealing with over there. And of course, that could happen from some sort of foreign adversary, or who knows, even maybe a domestic entity. So these are things that we should be taking notes on so we can be prepared for whatever future is coming our way. Now, one of the main things that I think you should take away from the way it's going over there right now is the fact that in many ways, the Ukrainians waited too long. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that once you allow the invading force or the occupational force to become the defenders, they have the advantage, right? So standard military doctrine basically says if you were to attack a defended position, especially in like an urban environment, it might take 3 attackers for every 1 defender. And some people have even estimated up to 6 attackers for every 1 defender. Now, there is some information out there, especially regarding some of the data that we've taken from conflicts like World War II, where there was a lot of urban warfare, right? And you can even say that, you know, if you're gonna attack a defending force in an urban environment, you need at least 2 to 1, and you might still have some good success with that ratio. However, for a fact and well-known statistic is that if the ratio is 1 to 1, equal in any way, then the attackers are going to lose or not going to be successful. So the second that they turned their defense into a counteroffensive, they gave the advantage to Russia. And this should tell you something. This should tell you that if you ever have this kind of situation happen in your area, whether or not it's some kind of crazy invasion or some kind of occupation, even if it's by some sort of domestic entity, or who knows, maybe people that wear blue helmets, well, then you need to act immediately. You can't let them take a defensive position. They have to be on the offense the entire time because you as the defender maintain that advantage of at least being able to have a 2 to 1 ratio for them to have twice the amount of people necessary to take you out, right? Now, the other thing to keep in mind regarding that is that when we think of those ratios, okay, so if you suddenly become the counteroffensive entity, right, you're the one who has to go on the aggression now. Well, if you don't have the numbers to at least have a 2 to 1 ratio, if not 3 or 6 to 1, right, then you're likely going to fail. And how many of us actually have those kinds of numbers already pre-established, right? Our communities are relatively small, especially in the preparedness community, right? People who are like-minded and willing to organize and get together and discuss these types of events are hard to come by. So imagine your group of maybe, I don't know, 10 people, and then dealing with an occupational force from some sort of foreign military. You don't have enough people to launch a counteroffensive. That's just not going to happen, right? So you have to maintain your defensive status for as long as possible because it will give you the advantage, especially that home turf advantage if you know all the ins and outs of your town, your neighborhood, your city, or wherever it is you might reside, okay? So that's the first big lesson I think we can take from this whole counteroffensive issue. The Ukrainians are experiencing large amounts of losses, at least that's what's being reported. I can't verify this because I'm not there, but that's what I'm being told. And at the same time, they're not gaining much traction or much territory. They're just kind of stuck. And Russia has placed many defensive positions over months and months of preparation, and they've restocked their munitions and their equipment and everything else in the meantime. So this counteroffensive is much more difficult to achieve than it would have been to defend the invading force from ever even accomplishing the goals that they've set into place of taking over some of those territories. So that's the main thing. They waited too long. They became the attackers instead of maintaining their status as defenders, and now they have given the advantage to the defenders. The other thing to keep in mind is that critical infrastructure is not off the table if something like this were to occur. And we saw what happened with the Kharkovka Dam, right? It was sabotaged. Was it Ukraine? Was it Russia? I think we can all speculate as to who would gain the most from said event. However, the main thing is that the dam was targeted and infrastructure was targeted to the degree that it caused a cataclysmic ecological disaster that is going to hurt people for many, many years to come, right? And the other thing to keep in mind is that if you live near something like a dam or a major power substation or anything that has strategic value that might give somebody else the advantage during some type of invasion scenario, then you should probably keep an eye out for that to be targeted and understand what it will bring to the table in the sense of any kind of destruction or devastation that might come along with that being targeted or sabotaged, right? So that's what we're learning so far. And this is just a very, bird's view perspective of the entire situation that's happening right now. But with what's going on, I just thought it was very important and prudent to mention that concept of the ratio required to launch a counteroffensive, the ratio required to go on the attack versus having that advantage as a defender. And as people who want to be prepared, we're generally taking a defensive position, right? So we want to be the defender. We're not going out of our way to find conflict, but we're preparing to repel it if need be. And by maintaining that defender status, you do give yourself a better advantage than trying to eventually launch a counteroffensive at a later date. So I think that, at least from my perspective, the main thing to take away from what they're dealing with right now over in Ukraine in this counteroffensive is that don't let it get to the point where you have to launch a counteroffensive. You want to maintain your status as a defender for as long as possible. Because you know what? If they have to send 2, 3, or 6 times the amount of people to deal with you, well, that's a pretty large advantage, and that might actually make them change their mind as to whether or not you're a worthy target, or if you're just going to waste a lot of their resources and they might as well just go somewhere else. I don't know. This is just speculation from somebody who doesn't have any military experience or background, but these are just the things that I consider and ponder, and I thought I would share that with you. And I think that, you know, these are the considerations we need to be making right now here in the preparedness community. Now, I do need to mention that the channel's biggest supporter is Midway USA, and they definitely help me get out here and prepare and do what I need to do to kind of set myself apart from any of the chaos that's happening out there in the world. And yeah, this is a nice little 20-inch build we have going here that I've really kind of grown to. I don't know why. It's just this 20-inch long boy can really put some work in, and this new optics setup on here is affordable, but very, very nice. So we'll talk about that in another video. Either way, listen, you got to get your stuff squared away. And I think by moving forward with the strategy of understanding that you have to act quickly, you can't allow a occupational or invading force to become the defenders by having that territory for a certain amount of time and that time to plan and prep and everything else related to being the defender. And you have to be willing to stop them before they get to that point. I guess that's the best way for me to say that, right? And honestly, this goes into tactics and strategy and everything else that's way above my head. But I have basic concepts and understandings of some of this information, so I figured I would share at least my perspective of it with you. And then, of course, in the comments, if you guys want to leave some more ideas or thoughts based on this conversation, I would definitely appreciate it, because that to me is healthy. Even if we don't agree, I can at least glean some information off of what you're trying to say with your point of view that might help me be better developed or more well-rounded for a situation similar to that unfolding in the future. And with everything happening in our country, don't be confused about the concept that it might end up being a domestic issue that we could be dealing with the exact same types of consequences or results, right? Look, the wind's picking up. I'm thinking my tripod's about to blow away. So, you guys have anything else to ask me or need anything else from me, you can go to magicprepper.com. You know what to do when it comes to contacting me or whatever you need. I also have Subscribe Star, which is $5 a month, and that's just if you want to get exclusive content, preparedness incentives, and some other cool stuff that I try to do over there. And honestly, I'm just trying to bring this information out there and use this current modern warfare conflict that we're able to witness from afar as a learning platform, as something that we can take data from and apply it to our strategy moving forward, understanding that this is how modern conventional warfare, especially in an urban environment, looks. And then by understanding that and learning from it, we can better prepare for some kind of similar scenario in the future. And that's just what I'm trying to do here. Anything else you need from me, you know what to do. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.